My sister walked out of the attorney's office with a check for $340,000. I walked out with a box of Grandpa's old tools and a letter that said, "For Megan, who always helped without being asked." That was it. 47 years of loving that man, of spending every Sunday at his farmhouse, of learning to fix engines and patch roofs and plant tomatoes beside him. And I got a toolbox while Vanessa got enough money to buy a house outright. She didn't even look at me as she climbed into her Mercedes. Just said over her shoulder, "You weren't using it anyway. You don't even." I just 18. "Megan, please, you have to help me. I'm going to lose everything. The house, the car, everything. They're saying I owe over $700,000. I listened to her cry for about 30 seconds. Then I said, "You weren't using that money anyway." And I hung up. Let me take you back, because this story isn't about $340,000. It's about being the grandchild who showed up every single week while someone else showed up only for the reading of the will. If you've ever loved someone deeply and watched a relative who barely knew them inherit everything, you already know this isn't just about inheritance. It's about justice that sometimes takes its own sweet time. Vanessa is 4 years older than me. Growing up, she was the pretty one, the charming one, the one who knew how to work a room and get what she wanted. I was the quiet one, the tomboy, the one who'd rather spend weekends at Grandpa's farm than at the mall. Our parents divorced when I was 8. Mom got custody, Dad moved to Oregon, and Grandpa, our father's father, became the most stable man in my life. His name was Harold Mitchell, and he'd built his farmhouse with his own hands in 1962. 20 acres of land an hour outside of town, with a barn that leaned slightly to the left and a workshop that smelled like sawdust and motor oil. He'd been an engineer for Ford for 30 years, retired early, spent his days fixing things and growing vegetables and teaching anyone who wanted to learn. Vanessa didn't want to learn. I did. When I was 10, Grandpa taught me how to change the oil in his old pickup truck. I remember lying on the creeper under that Ford, his weathered hands guiding mine to the drain plug, the smell of used motor oil mixing with grass and summer heat. "Most people pay someone else to do this," he said, "but if you know how things work, you never have to depend on anyone." I took that lesson to heart. Vanessa was at a sleepover that weekend. She was always somewhere else. When I was 12, he taught me to use his table saw. My mother was furious when she found out, said it was too dangerous. But Grandpa had shown me the safety guards, the proper stance, the way to feed wood through slowly and let the blade do the work. "Respect the tool," he said, "and it'll respect you back." We built a birdhouse that afternoon, pine boards and brass screws, painted it blue because that was Grandma's favorite color. It hung in his yard until the day he died. When I was 13, Grandpa had a birthday party. Small gathering at the farm, family only. Vanessa showed up an hour late with a card she'd clearly bought at the gas station on the way. Grandpa wore that belt every time he worked in the shop. He wore it until the day he died. Vanessa's card went in the trash that night. She didn't notice. By 14, I was spending every Sunday at the farm. I'd help Grandpa fix the tractor, repair fencing, paint the barn. We'd eat lunch on his porch, ham sandwiches and lemonade, and he'd tell me stories about building the house, about Grandma who died before I was born. "She would have liked you," he told me once. "You've got her stubbornness." Vanessa came maybe twice a year, Christmas and his birthday, and she'd spend most of the visit on her phone. She'd kiss his cheek, call him Gramps, accept whatever cash he gave her, and leave. I watched her pocket $50 bills without even saying thank you. I don't think she ever had a real conversation with him. I don't think she knew his middle name was Robert, or that he'd served in Korea, or that he still kept Grandma's reading glasses in his nightstand. When I was 17, Grandpa had his first stroke. Minor, the doctor said, but a warning. He needed help around the farm. My mother said we should convince him to sell. I said I'd help more. Started driving out every weekend, sometimes after school too. Mowed his lawn, stocked his fridge, made sure his medications were organized. Vanessa was in college by then, sorority life, barely came home. When she did visit Grandpa, it was for 20 minutes, enough to post a photo on Instagram and leave. The years passed. I went to community college, got a job as an office manager at a construction company, bought a small house 15 minutes from Grandpa's farm. I was there 3, sometimes 4 days a week. Cooked him dinner every Sunday, drove him to doctor's appointments. When he had his second stroke at 79, I took 2 weeks off work to stay with him during recovery. Slept on his couch. Made sure he did his physical therapy. Vanessa sent flowers from a delivery service 3 states away. She didn't come. Grandpa recovered mostly. Slower now, needed a cane, couldn't work in the shop like he used to. But his mind was sharp. We'd sit on the porch and talk for hours. "This land will be worth something someday," he'd say. "When I'm gone, I want it to go to someone who'll appreciate it." I assumed he meant me. Vanessa got married when she was 28. Big wedding, 300 guests, destination venue in Napa Valley. She invited Grandpa but didn't offer to help him get there. I drove him myself, 8 hours each way. He gave her a check for $10,000 as a wedding gift. He came to Grandpa's farm exactly once, spent the whole time talking about what the land could be worth. 20 acres this close to the city? You're sitting on a gold mine, Harold. After they left, Grandpa looked at me and said, "That man sees dollar signs where I see 40 years of my life." Grandpa turned 82, then 83, then 84. His health was stable but declining. I was there more than ever. Had a key to his house, handled his bills when his hands shook too much to write checks. Vanessa called every few months, quick conversations, 5 minutes maximum. I don't think she noticed that Grandpa's voice was getting weaker, that he was getting ready to leave. He died on a Tuesday in March, 3 weeks after his 85th birthday. I was there, holding his hand. He'd asked me to come that morning, said he wasn't feeling well, said something didn't feel right. I drove over before work, found him in his chair by the window, looking out at the fields he'd farmed for 40 years. His breathing was shallow. His hand was cold when I took it. "Stay," he said. Just that one word. So I stayed. By noon, he was gone. Peaceful. Just slipped away between one breath and the next, like falling asleep. I sat with him for a long time after, in the quiet of that farmhouse he'd built with his own hands. The afternoon light came through the windows the way it always did, golden and warm. I could hear the wind in the trees outside, the distant call of birds. Everything was exactly the same, and nothing would ever be the same again. The funeral was small, the way Grandpa had wanted. He'd left instructions, written them out years ago in his careful handwriting. A few dozen people came, old colleagues from his Ford days, neighbors who'd known him for decades. Vanessa wore designer black and cried photogenically for the photos. Brad worked the room like it was a networking event. I stood by the casket and said goodbye to the only man who'd ever made me feel seen. After the service, my aunt pulled me aside. "He loved you so much," she said, her eyes wet. "He talked about you all the time, how proud he was, how much you'd learned." I nodded, throat too tight to speak. Vanessa was across the room, checking her phone. She didn't hear what our aunt said. She never did. Then I called Vanessa. She didn't answer. Called back 4 hours later. "Oh my God, when?" She sounded upset, but she also asked, almost immediately, "Do you know anything about the will?" The will reading was 2 weeks later. Grandpa's attorney, Richard Hoffman, sat us down in a conference room with leather chairs and water in crystal glasses. The room smelled like furniture polish and old paper. Vanessa and Brad sat across from me, his hand on her knee, both of them leaning forward slightly like runners at a starting line. My mother sat in the corner, quiet, not in the will, but wanting to be there. Mr. Hoffman read the preliminary statements, legal language, terms and conditions, the standard framework of transferring a life into numbers. Then he got to the specific bequests. Mr. Hoffman read the will, dated 4 years earlier. The house and land were to be sold, proceeds split equally between us. His investment accounts, about $680,000, divided with charitable donations and the remainder split between Vanessa and me. His personal effects, including all tools and vehicles, left to me specifically. I did the math. About $320,000 each, plus half of whatever the property sold for. More than fair. Then Mr. Hoffman paused. There's an addendum, dated 18 months before Harold's passing. It specifies that Vanessa is to receive an additional $20,000 from Megan's share as compensation for the financial difficulties she has faced in her marriage. What financial difficulties? I asked. Vanessa's face was carefully blank. Grandpa wanted to help me. Brad's business had some setbacks. I told him about it. When did you tell him this? I visited him about 2 years ago. 2 years ago, when Grandpa had been at his weakest, recovering from a fall, his mind foggy from medications. She'd visited alone when I wasn't there, but that wasn't the worst part. Mr. Hoffman cleared his throat. There's one more adjustment. The property is to be sold and the proceeds given entirely to Vanessa. Harold wrote that Megan has already received fair compensation through her time spent at the farm. The room went silent. I could hear the clock ticking. So I get the tools, I said quietly, and Vanessa gets everything else. Vanessa was already nodding. This is what Grandpa wanted. I looked at her. My sister, who'd visited twice a year, who'd never learned how to change oil or fix a fence, who'd shown up when he was weak and convinced him to give her everything. You're right, I said. We should respect his wishes. As she walked past me in the parking lot, she said it. You weren't using it anyway. You don't even need the money. I watched her drive away. Then I put the toolbox in my truck and thought about everything I knew about my grandfather. Harold Mitchell had been an engineer for 30 years. He documented everything, every receipt, every repair, every modification to the farm. He had filing cabinets in his workshop, organized by year going back to 1962. Paper doesn't lie, he used to say. People forget. Paper remembers. And I had the key to his workshop. I didn't fight Vanessa, didn't argue with the will, didn't hire a lawyer or make a scene at family dinners. I cashed my check and put it in a savings account. I went to work. I lived my life. And every weekend, I went to Grandpa's farm and went through his workshop. Slowly, methodically, the way he'd taught me to fix an engine, one piece at a time. The property was listed for sale within a month. Vanessa's developer contacts handled everything. They put a sign in the yard, scheduled open houses, talked about subdivision potential and zoning changes. I watched strangers walk through the house Grandpa built, measuring rooms and calculating profits, but I kept coming every weekend. I had the tools to sort through. That was my right. I started with the filing cabinets, 40 years of records, organized by year, tax returns, receipts, maintenance logs for the tractor and the truck, and every appliance in the house. I learned things about my grandfather's life I'd never known. His patents from Ford, 3 of them, for improvements to engine components that had earned him royalty checks for decades. Letters from my grandmother before they were married, love letters that made me cry on the workshop floor. A whole life, documented in yellowing paper and faded ink. I found photographs too. Me and Grandpa at every age, working on projects, eating on the porch, standing next to completed repairs. There were almost no photos of Vanessa at the farm, because she was never there. It took 4 months to find it. I was cleaning behind the water heater, an area I'd never bothered with before, when I saw the metal lockbox bolted to the wall. Hidden. Deliberate. I got a wrench and pulled it free. Inside was the second will, dated 2 months before he died. Handwritten, in Grandpa's shaky but recognizable script, witnessed by his neighbor Thomas Reed and his longtime doctor, Patricia Hoffman, the attorney's wife. In this will, the farm was to go to me, not to be sold. His investments split equally, no addendum. And there was a paragraph at the bottom. I am writing this because I believe the previous addendum was obtained under false pretenses. Vanessa visited me in March when I was recovering from a fall, and my thinking was not clear. She told me things about her finances that I have since learned were untrue. She lied to take what should go to her sister. Megan has been my companion and helper for 30 years. She has earned every penny through love and devotion. I am sorry I was fooled. This is my true and final wish. I sat on the workshop floor and cried, for the first time since he'd died. Not just for the money, for the fact that he'd seen it, he'd known, he'd tried to fix it. I took the will to a different lawyer. Catherine Wells specialized in estate disputes. When she read the second will, her eyebrows rose steadily higher. If we can prove the first addendum was obtained through fraud, we can contest the entire probate. Do you have evidence your sister lied about her financial situation? I thought about Brad's business, about their house in the gated community with the pool and the clubhouse, about the vacations they posted on Instagram, Europe, and the Caribbean, about the designer clothes and the newer Mercedes. I can get evidence, I said. It took another 3 months. Catherine hired a private investigator. We subpoenaed financial records, tax returns, bank statements going back 3 years. We found the mobile notary, Patricia Simmons, who remembered the signing vividly. She'd felt uncomfortable, she said. The old man had seemed confused, kept asking what he was signing, and his granddaughter kept prompting him. Just sign here, Grandpa, it's what we discussed. The notary had almost refused, but Vanessa had been insistent, said her grandfather had memory issues, said this was what he wanted. We found evidence that Brad's business had never had significant setbacks. His company had actually expanded during the time Vanessa claimed they were struggling. They'd bought a vacation property in Florida 6 months before she convinced Grandpa to change his will. Their finances were stable. She had lied about everything. And we found something else. The addendum had been drafted by an attorney Vanessa knew through Brad, not by Mr. Hoffman. It had been presented to Grandpa during a time when he was recovering from a fall and taking pain medication that affected his judgment. The witnesses remembered Vanessa saying it was nothing major, just some clarifications. They hadn't read what they were witnessing. They'd trusted her. Catherine filed the contest. Vanessa's lawyer called immediately, blustering. Then we sent them the second will, the investigator's report, the depositions, the financial records. 2 days later, Vanessa called. What the hell are you doing? You're trying to steal my inheritance? Your inheritance? I said. The farm Grandpa built with his own hands that you visited twice a year? The will was legal. He wanted me to have it. He wanted to fix his mistake. He wrote it down. He was sorry he was fooled. Those were his words. You're doing this for money. You're greedy. I laughed. Actually laughed. Vanessa, you lied to a dying man to steal from your own sister. You told him your husband's business was failing when it wasn't. You had him sign paperwork when he was confused and medicated. You took a farm he built over 40 years and you're selling it to developers for condos. And I'm the greedy one? We needed that money, she said, her voice cracking. Brad's business bought a vacation house in Florida 6 months before you changed the will. I have the records. You lied about everything. She hung up. The legal process took 8 months. Vanessa fought it at first, denied everything, claimed the second will was forged. But handwriting experts confirmed it was Grandpa's writing, matching dozens of other documents from his files. The witnesses, Thomas Reed and Patricia Hoffman, testified that he'd been lucid and specific about his intentions. Dr. Hoffman said Grandpa had called her specifically, asked her to witness because he didn't trust what Vanessa had done before. The financial records proved the lies. The notary admitted she'd felt uncomfortable. Slowly, inevitably, Vanessa's case fell apart. Her own lawyer started pushing for settlement. The evidence is overwhelming, Catherine told me. They know if this goes to trial, Vanessa could face criminal charges. Elder abuse, fraud, forgery. She could go to prison. The settlement came a week before trial. It was brutal, but it was better than prison. She had to return my full share of the investment accounts, including the $20,000 she'd taken. Return all proceeds from the property sale, $540,000. And because the addendum was obtained fraudulently, she had to pay penalties and damages totaling another $160,000, plus legal fees, plus interest. Total, over $700,000. The exact amount she'd tried to steal doubled. She didn't have it. She'd already spent most of the money. New kitchen, newer Mercedes, vacations. They had to sell everything. The house. The cars. Brad's business was leveraged to cover part of the debt. By the time it was done, they were renting a 2-bedroom apartment and driving a 10-year-old Honda. The 2 a.m. phone call came 2 weeks after the final payment cleared. Megan, please. You have to help me. I'm going to lose everything. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. The same sister who'd walked out of that attorney's office with a check for $340,000, who'd looked at me holding Grandpa's toolbox and said I wasn't using the money anyway. I listened to her sob for about 30 seconds. Thought about all those Sundays at the farm. About the oil changes and the fence repairs and the Sunday dinners. About sitting with Grandpa when he died, holding his hand, being there when it mattered. You weren't using that money anyway, I said. And I hung up. I own Grandpa's farm now. Bought it back from the developers before they could break ground. Paid fair market value with the settlement money. The sale had been pending when the contest was filed, stuck in legal limbo for months. When it was finally released, I made an offer the same day. The developers were annoyed but took the money. They didn't care about the land. They only cared about profit. The house needs work. Years of deferred maintenance while it sat on the market, waiting to be demolished for condos. The roof leaks in one corner. The porch needs new boards. The barn's lean has gotten worse, but I've got time. I've got the skills Grandpa taught me. I've got his tools. I go out there every weekend just like I used to. Fix the fencing section by section. Maintain the barn with the same techniques he showed me when I was 14. Plant tomatoes in the garden where we used to work side by side, the same varieties he grew for 40 years. Sometimes I sit on the porch with Lemonade, in his old chair that still has the wear marks from decades of use, and I swear I can hear his voice, telling me stories, teaching me things, being proud of who I became. The toolbox sits in his workshop. There's a note I found in the bottom, under the socket set. For Megan, these tools built this farm. You built this family. Don't let anyone tell you that's worth less than money. But just in case, Check behind the water heater. Love, Grandpa? He knew. He knew what Vanessa would try. He trusted me to wait, to be patient, to do things the right way. One piece at a time. He'd given me the tools, not just the physical ones in the workshop. The tools to fix what was broken. The patience to do it right. My mother calls sometimes. She's conflicted, torn between her daughters. She doesn't blame me, not exactly, but she wishes things could have been different. She's still your sister, she says. I know. That's what makes it worse. Vanessa and I don't speak anymore. She tried once, about a year after everything was settled. Sent me an email saying she was sorry, that she'd made mistakes, that she wanted to repair our relationship. I read it twice. Then I deleted it without responding. Some betrayals go too deep. You can forgive someone without letting them back into your life. You can understand why they did what they did and still choose to move on without them. Last I heard, she and Brad were still in the rental apartment, still rebuilding, still facing the consequences of what they did. I don't wish them harm. I just don't wish them anything at all. If you've ever been told that your love isn't worth money, that your presence doesn't count, that the person who showed up twice a year deserves more than the person who was there every week, this story is for you. You deserve the inheritance. Not because of blood, but because of what you built. And if someone tries to take it from you, be patient. Document everything. Wait. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been passed over for an inheritance you deserved? I read every story. Subscribe for more stories about people who waited for justice and found it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting. It's letting people face the consequences of their own greed. And sometimes, if you're lucky, there's a second will behind the water heater.